Hi, welcome to this second user group webinar. And I'd like to welcome back all of those of you who attended our first webinar and say hi to all our new attendees. In our first webinar, Animating with Oomph, I covered off a new trick that I called Hotspot Animations. If you haven't seen it yet, there's a link to the recorded webinar in the Oomph wiki under the section's tutorials. All of our recorded webinars will actually be in there now, so if you've missed this one or you want to share this with some other people, that's where you'll find it, in the Oomph wiki under tutorials. So in this webinar, I want to demonstrate how we can create richer activity in our magazines and multimedia apps using Action Hotspots. Action Hotspots are a unique feature in Oomph. They are special hotspots that can be used to control other page objects such as card flips, videos, and page layers. Using these action hotspots as buttons, we can trigger actions within the page to show or hide information without having to swipe or move around. I'll just come and share my screen now. I've just opened up a Q&A pod if anybody needs to ask any questions. So, for example, on this page here, I'm going to use an action hotspot to automatically reveal a tabbed field of information that sits within a vertical in-page slideshow in the action hotspot and then close it. So here's our page. And here's our action hotspot up in the top here. When I tap on the little button, the panel slides in, the action hotspot slides in, and inside it is a vertical in-page slideshow. At the same time, the button has changed direction now, indicating that we can close it. So when I tap it, it'll close the action hotspot, change the button, and vice versa. So that's a quick sample of an action hotspot. Action hotspots allow you to create richer interactivity within your app, producing multimedia type interactions and providing alternative methods of presenting information. Later in the webinar, I'll be doing a walkthrough of the action hotspots I used in an app I recently created called Experience the Highs. I created this app for the Armidale, Guyra, Uralla and Walcha district councils. And I packed it really full of multiple action hotspots because these are things I really love, as well as slideshows, as panorama photography, Google Maps, and video. I put a link to it in the email we sent out. If you haven't downloaded it yet, please download it. Don't forget to rate it if you like it. Give us a few stars, it'd be great. So what we're going to start with is the naming convention. So we're going to go through the basics and then we're going to look at this more sort of complex interaction or how we bring it all together. So let me just bring up my InDesign. I've just loaded my new InDesign CS6, so rather exciting to have a look and see what's in there. And we'll be doing some webinars in the future on some of the cool things that we can do with the layout pages. So the hotspot name for a action hotspot looks something like this: action, object identifier, directive 1, directive 2, directive 3, etc. So if we were looking at creating something, we might do something like a card flip. It would be action, card flip 1, comma, and then the directive. So we've got the action, we're telling it which object to apply this action to, and then the directive in this case would be something like flip. So the object identifiers are reference to some elements of the current page, such as an in-page slideshow, a video, a widget, or an individual page layer, and directives are the actions you wish the object to perform, and they vary based upon the type of objects, because obviously you can't flip a video, but you can flip a card flip. You can start a video, but you can't start a card flip. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through and look at what objects and actions we can perform. And I've created a little file here, and once again, this file will be available to download, so you can see the type of things we've got. So the first one we're going to look at here is one that we call position copy. So it's just a couple of simple layers, but what we're going to do, we've got two layers. We've got a layer underneath here, and we've got a layer over the top, and we've got a button that has an action attached to it. And in this case, the action is layer 2, position equals 256.0. I'm just going to hide InDesign and come into my iOS simulator and bring up our demonstration file. Okay, so here's our first one. So we have the name of this field as layer 2. We've just got a color in it and a piece of text. We've got a button that has the hyperlink action attached to it, and we're saying that we want this to go action layer 2 position equals 256.0. So as soon as I tap this, the layer moves across. And 256 happens to be the width of that particular object. So it's as simple as that. So we can simply make actions like that. So this first object and action is a layer. It's a page layer referenced by a number. Okay, so for example, it could be p1-1.pdf, layer 3, and we can do 3 different sort of things with that. We can animate, change the size, or change the position. In this case, we've changed the position. If we move to the next one, what we're going to look at here is changing the size of the object. So in this case, it's still the same thing. We've got action. We're still actioning the same object, but in this case, we're going to change the size. And we're going to change the size to 384 by 512. So I tap that, and there's my size change. Now, you might look at that and think, well, all he wanted to do was change the size. Why has it moved it up to the top left? The thing is that you have to remember that this layer is not just the object itself, but an object that sits on a page that's 768 by 1024, anchored at the 0 point. So when we've changed the size of it, the whole page has shrunk down into that top left corner. So it probably wasn't quite what you're expecting. The first time I did it, it wasn't quite what I expected. So if we wanted to resize the page and have it centered, we'd have to do the following. And what I've done here, I've added another directive. Remember in the original one, we could say we could do an action, we could identify the object we wanted to do, and then we could do directive 1, directive 2, directive 3, etc. So what I've got down here is I'm actioning layer 2, and I'm doing 2 directives. The first one is to change the position and then change the size. So when I tap this now, we've done 2 things at the same time. We've changed the position of it because we know we're going to shrink it down, and we've changed the size of it as well. So that's the way you can start using sort of multiple directions on it. So let's move along. We'll go on to the next one. And here, the object now is going to be a slideshow. So this is a standard slideshow. It's a field, and I can show you in the InDesign document. If we come into here, we'll close that up there, and we'll come to slideshow. So here's the page set up inside here. So this field here is a hyperlink with IPS1, and we have our 2 buttons with the actions attached. If I tap on one of those, you can see the action up here. So here we're doing action IPS page equals preview. We'll come back to that in here. So this button here is actioning the IPS1 slideshow, and when we click on this, we want to go to the previous page. Over here, we're actioning the same object, but we want to go to the next page. So when I tap on here, it will go to the next page, next page, next page, previous, previous, previous. So this is we're starting to sort of manipulate other objects now. So with a slideshow, we can do things like animate, we can change the size, we can change the position, or we can change the page. Moving on to the next object, we've got video. So once again, if I quickly come back into InDesign and we'll look at the video page, pretty much the same thing. There. If I tap on that, you can see that it's an IPv1, in-page video 1. Now this time we've got 3 buttons because there's a couple of different things we can do. So with videos, we can animate the video, we can move it around on the screen, we can change the size of the video, so we can have it as a thumbnail, and when you click it, it becomes large. We can change the position, or we can actually do these 3 actions. We can do a play, pause, or stop. And they're really simple. All we do is we attach this hyperlink to a button saying Action IPv1 play, pause, or stop. So when I hit play, now I'll hit pause. Now I'll come back and hit play again. And now we'll hit stop to finish. So it's as simple as that. If you want to start building sort of interactive controls into your interactions and into your apps, you can certainly do it using these 3 objects here. So remember, video, you can animate, change size, change position, stop, play, or pause. Okay, the next one we go to is the humble card flip. As I showed you before, this is a really simple one. Action, card flip, 1 flip, nothing much to it. Tap that and it changes. You know, if we could, further on, I'll show you some little tricks we can do with this, but so basically with a card flip, you can animate it, change the size, change the position, change the page, or flip it. So there's a sort of extra one in there. It's the only one that has the flip. The other thing we can do is we can apply these actions to any sort of widget we want. So in this case, we're applying it to a map widget. And we're doing a simple animation. So these are one of the standard animations. It could be fade in, fade out, move in from top, move in from bottom, scale, rotate, what have you. So with a widget, you know, and the widgets are flipbooks, maps, and Twitters, we can animate, change the size or position. So in this case, we're going to animate, and we've got a simple fade out. So when I tap that, it just fades out. As simple as that. So we can have another button that faded it in, etc. So that's pretty cool. But the thing is that we can go even further than this, and we can modify the actions. So not only can we apply a number of actions to our objects, but we can also apply what we call modifiers to some of the actions. These are additional directives that don't perform any action on their own, but influence the behavior of a particular action, and they come under the heading of transitions. So a transition means the style of animation used when transitioning between pages or slides. And once again, if you go to the wiki, this is sort of all written up on the wiki, and you can work through and try different things. So transitions can be used both on object and action hotspots. And the naming convention for transitions are, and you'll see down here, transition equals whatever the transition is. And the supported transition specifiers are none, for no animation at all. Dissolve, where you do a gradual dissolve or fade transition. Fade through black, where it fades out to black, then fades in the next slide. Push, like a horizontal push through like a slideshow. So you could make a frame, just call it an object, and actually turn it into a slideshow by using the buttons. Push vertical, flip and curl. So in this case, what we're going to do is I've used 2 different actions here, push vertical and transition equals curl. So when I do the previous button, you see it's pushing the slide down vertically. Now if I go to the next action, hopefully you can see this fast enough, it's actually doing a page curl up the page. So previous, push vertical, curl, push vertical, curl. If I wanted it to be a fade through for black, I could make it transition equals fade through black. So we've seen an action hotspot typically lists multiple actions for a specific object to perform. In this case, we're going to look at multiple actions. For example, we might want to have a layer animate onto the screen while simultaneously fading in. And this is done by simply listing all the directives separated by commas. So you do, as we saw before, action, object, fade in, move in from left. Or in the case of the one where I had the thing scale and move at the same time. So if we had, let's say we had 2 actions we wanted to perform at once. So we wanted an action to change position and then fade out. We could simply all string those together. But in this case, we actually may want to do something different. In here, what I want to do is I actually want to have 2 separate actions, not multiple actions, but 2 separate actions. So what I want to do is when I hit this little button here, I want the position of this object to change, but I want the button to change as well. So maybe I should actually sort of show you what I've done in InDesign for this. So if we close this up here and we bring up multiple. Okay. So you see here, I don't have a graphic in here, but this is a object holder called move, or called buttons. And then what I've done is I've created two small buttons here. So I have two separate buttons in placeholders. So what's going to happen here, when I click the first button, and the container is, instead of calling object 1, the container is called move, I'm saying for this action, take object 1 and move it to a position of 256 by 188 on the page. At the same time, or after that, I want another action, and I want this button here to fade out. Now, underneath this button, I have another button that has a different action on it. The action of the second button, which is called restore, is to take object 1 and set its position back to where it was originally. Now, the cool thing about this is instead of having to type the reverse number in there, we can simply say position equals original. So it knows exactly where to go to. And then what I want to do is the button that I've faded out, the one that sits on top, I want to fade that button back in. So the cool thing is here we've got two action hotspots doing multiple actions, creating this wonderful sort of multimedia environment. So I'm going to tap on action position, and the button moves across, the object layer moves across. But you'll see now down here, the button is now changed to action original. So I tap that, and it moves that object back in place. The button's now changed to say action position. And once again, the same thing. The button now says action original. Tapping that, it just puts it back into place. So remember, the first button moves the object. The second button fades itself out. The button underneath puts the object back in its original position and then fades the button in above it. And this is one of the really cool things about, you know, how we can start putting this stuff together. And this is, I think, really, to me, the thing that I love about Oomph is this way you could just start building multiple sort of layers of interaction on top of each other by combining all these things together. So we know what we can do with all of these different action hotspots. What I want to now show you is this practical application using hotspots. And once again, I'm going to use the app that I recently finished for Armidale called Experience the Highs. I know quite a few of you have downloaded it. For those of you who haven't, I'll just give you a quick run through of it. This is the opening page. We have, for those of you who saw the Action Hotspots, animating Action Hotspots or animating hotspots on the last webinar, this little button down here is a nice example of that. If I slide through here, it brings up a number of panorama options we can go and look at. There's a link to a PDF brochure. We're loading Google Maps, and then we've got some other little links down here. So if I tap on Dangar's Falls, it takes me into a page that has a panorama. Now this is a gyro panorama, so if you have it on your iPads, as you move it around, it'll spin around. This is the base of Dangar Falls. Unfortunately, there wasn't that much water, but I tell you, it was a hell of a climb to get down there. And that's the panorama. Now, we've got a couple of other buttons on the page here. We've got a button that takes us backwards and forwards. In this case, this is really like a single page app. You know, there's no movement up or down until you get to the PDF file. So what I've done is I've incorporated all the movement in the page itself. So we have a little button here that takes us to home. And you'll notice down here we've got a more information button. So when I tap on that, a whole panel slides up in front of the panorama. Now inside this panel, or this action hotspot that's slid up, are a couple of other elements. At the top here we have a slideshow. In the bottom here, this is a page swap, and we've placed some buttons in here. So at the moment, it gives a small description of what we're seeing there. If I tap on this little button here, it'll bring up a Google map and show us the location of Dangar's Falls. And the third button brings up a little video, so we can tap to play that. And for those of you who haven't been to Armidale, it's a beautiful place to go. There's lots of amazing gorges and good places to walk and stuff like that. Now, you've noticed down the bottom here, the button has changed. It's now saying back to panorama. As soon as I tap that, it takes that whole panel away and takes me back to the panorama again. Now, this is repeated on multiple pages throughout the site. So, for instance, here on Weeping Rock, now there's no video for here, so we've compensated and dropped the video button out. We just have the information in the Google map in here. So that's what it looks like. What I want to do is sort of show you how it's done. So the first thing for me is really building what I call a mind map. And let me just show you here what my mind map looked like for this piece of interaction. I don't know how well you can see that. I'll zoom in a little and show you here. But this is me roughly sketching out how my interaction will start. And I'd highly recommend this as a starting point. You know, there's nothing beats pencil on paper to help you think your way through. Now, obviously this is a bit of a mess. So what I've done is I've gone through and I've cleaned this up to give you a better idea of how this whole structure works. Okay. This is what it looks like. That whole folder for Dangars looks like this. Okay, I'm just going to zoom in and I'll just quickly walk you through it. So p1-1.html is the panorama. So I'm using an HTML overlay. I've got a folder with 6 images in it. And I've got a number of files down here that relate to the panorama. I've got the panorama XML, the panorama landscape XML, because it's a different view when you go to landscape. And I've got 2 JavaScript files that manage the panorama and manage the gyro. On top of that, I've got a p1-2, which is a little identifier that says Dangars Falls or wherever you are inside the file. For the landscape version, we've got the same thing. We have a HTML file for the panorama, L1-2 PDF for the home button, and then the L1-3 identifier for the name of the location. Now, because I'm repeating these same files through 6 different panoramas, the files that are grey here on the schematic are actually shared layers. Now, this is something we haven't really talked about yet. I don't know how many of you have sort of investigated shared layers, but they're certainly part of the latest release of Oomph Viewer. And shared layers allows you to take these layers and move them out of a containing folder into a top root folder, a bit like we used to do with animations, where you pull animations to the top level, and they're available throughout the whole app. The same thing here with these files, and we'll be doing a webinar on shared assets because they're very cool. So basically, all of these grey files live outside of the Dangars folder in the shared folders. So our first one here, P1-3, this has our first object. Okay, this is the large panel that slides up into the page. And in fact, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make it even easier again. I'm just going to go to the next panel. Because we're talking about the Action Hotspots, these are the only files that we really need to deal with. All of these files create these 3 actions. Okay, the action with the text in it, with the slideshow, with the Google map and the video. So in our first section, So in our first page, we have this object sitting down here slightly off the screen. Remember, if you're doing Action Hotspot and you want it to move in off the screen, as long as you have 1 pixel of that field on top of the PDF, it'll work and you can actually animate it into the page itself. So I have a folder called Object 2, and inside that Object 2 folder, I have 3 PDFs. The first PDF is called S1-1 and it has an IPS1 field in it for the in-page slideshow. The second page has another field, and this time Object 3, which is referring down here to another folder, and then the third one has a couple of simple graphics on it. In Object 3, we've got 3 PDFs, 2 of them with multiple pages. So the first page is just a blank white page. because I needed to cover up what was underneath it. The second one is a field with a map holder, and the third page is a field with an IPv1. So this is going to be, we're going to use Action Hotspots to move through these different pages. S1-2 has some text in it. S1-3 has the buttons that we'll use to navigate through here. And these are the Action Hotspots. Now, if we come up further, back up to the top here, and I'll just zoom out a little bit. Okay, I then have two more PDFs which hold the buttons that action the page up and close the page. I also have these additional folders here which contain the map, CSV information, the in-page slideshow files, and the video. If I come to this next page, what you can see here are the actual Action Hotspots used. So there's really not that many Action Hotspots themselves, but we use a lot of object holders to refer to. I have the two buttons, and then I have the buttons that will take us through this internal set of 3 pages. So you can see here, this first button does quite a lot. Let's take a look at that. So this first button does action object to, my mistake, that's the close button. Let's go to the open button, because the open button's easier. So we do action object to position equals 0, 0. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm taking that object that's sitting off the bottom of the page and moving it right up to 0, 0 to the very top. Then I say action object 1 position equals 26, 10, 14. And object 1 is the open button. So the next thing I'm doing is I'm moving that open button down off the screen. And the third thing I'm doing is I'm moving the close button up onto the screen. So if you have a look at here, that's my initial button. So when we come and look at here, and if I come out of here, come back to here. This more information button is object 1. And remember what's going to happen here when I tap this, the whole object 2 is going to slide up into place. And the object 4 button, the object 1 button will go down and the object 4 button will come up. So the object 4 says back to panorama, the object 1 says more information. And remember that this panel here, object 2, contains the slideshow and then these other files. Now when we want to close it, this is what we do for closing it. We take the object 2, which was the big panel with the slideshow in it, and we put its position back to original. We bring the object 4, which is the close button, back to its original. And we take the object 1, which is the open button, back to its original. And then what we do in the 3 pages, where it's got the text and the map and the video, we set that back to page 1. So the next time somebody opens it, it will be set back at that text. Otherwise, if we didn't have that last bit in, if somebody reopened it, if the video was the last thing we looked at, that would be the first thing that appeared. And I want to make sure that these get reset back to the original position. So that's the command for those 2 open buttons. Oh. Trigger happy here this morning with the zoom in and out. It's completely down. Okay, so for the next buttons, the ones down the bottom here, we're saying action object 3. So object 3 contains all these 3 PDFs. Page 1, transition equals dissolve. Action object 3, go to page 2 with a dissolve. Action object 3, go to page 3 with a dissolve. Simple as that. So we're really using sort of all kinds of things in here. We're using the transitions, we're using the multiple actions to control it, and multiple directives. And that's it. With just those simple commands, we've created that quite complex piece of interaction in here. And once again, it applies to all of the different pages. So using the shared layers is great because it means you don't have to have folders full of lots and lots of files. Okay, so that's basically the design schematic. So once I've done my mind map and sort of got it figured out, I go, okay, well, let's clean it up so I can really understand it, especially if I'm working with other people. They can look at it and really get a good understanding of what's going on. The next stage for me is to build a template. And basically, what a template is for me, it's all of the actions without using any of the assets. So basically, I don't want to cloud it with, like, you know, having video, having slides or anything else like that. I just want to have simple placeholders. And what I've done here is I've created the whole interaction. So if I come back to here and basically sort of peel off all these, you can see I've created all of the pages. So there's my base page, remember the p1-1.html. Now when I build the template too, I don't worry about shared layers because I want to make sure it's easier for me just to put them all in one folder, make sure it works, and then I can pull out the files into shared layers after that. So there's my base file. Okay, then my second file, remember, p1-2 had the panorama title at the top of it. Then my third file is when I start to bring in the objects. So you can see here, I've got the object holder at 988 pixels down. And the size of the object holder is 768 by 1024. If I come back into the you can see down there. Yeah, it's locked. There it is. You can see it actually extends down off the page. So as long as you've got a gap in here, you can still then move that file up the page. And that file is named object2. So if I tap on here, we can see over here in our hyperlinks, it's called object2. So whatever's in the object2 folder will get put into here. So let's come to the next page. And the next page is just some simple graphics. Yeah. So these, I put them in there, but because I don't have any other pages to refer to, I don't really sort of action those at all. But I just have them there because they're handy to put in there. And these are the hyperlinks that go with those graphics. So they're in there. Then we go to P1-6, and here's another one of these little actions. So this is the object holder, and that's the position of it, just like off the page. So this is the close button. Remember, this is object 4. So once again, if I tap on that, we'll see if it was lock it. We'll tap on here. We'll see over here in the hyperlinks it's object 4. So that's my close button. There's my open button. Okay. So that's in place there, and that's actually on the page, so it's being seen. So anything that's in the Object1 folder will show up in there. And now I start to get into my different areas here, like object 1, S1-1, object 4, and that's the buttons we're looking at here. In fact, I'll just turn all of these on. In this page here, this is what gets loaded into object 2. So the first one is the slideshow at the top, and then the second one down the bottom is object 3. So this top one is linked as IPS1, and down here it's linked as object 3. So those are the two separate files there. Then these are my buttons for those 3 panels. So I've got in this one, here's when I click on this, it goes to page 1 with a dissolve. If I come back in this one, so these are, on the first page, this is inactive because that's page number 1. So this one goes to page 2 with a transition equals dissolve, and to here. And the bottom one goes to page 3 with a transition equals dissolve. So these simply move us backwards and forwards through these 3 pages. The open and close button is what reveals the panel, and that's it. There's really actually not that much sort of interactivity going on, but it's really the idea of getting your head around how these things interact and where they need to be placed in the page. So you'll see that down in here, I've identified them as object 3, S1-3, S1-3-1-2-3. So when I export those, I want to export those all as one section. So if I look down here, you'll see here we've got 8, 9, and 10. Okay, all of these become those 3 separate pages, and they need to be output at the same time. So this is a hyperlink to map 1. This is a hyperlink to IPv1. And there's my whole structure. These down at the bottom here, these are slides that I make up for the slideshow. So I've just created 3 simple basic slides, 1, 2, 3. This is the video page. This is the map page. This is my blank page, just a white graphic. It's my text page. And then I've got my button pages. So they sit as layers on top of each other. And then I've got my Object 2 page. So it may sound a little confusing, but once you look at it in relationship to the schematic and sort of play around with it, it makes perfect sense. Okay. So once I've worked all this out, then basically what I do is I export all of these into a template. So if I come into here and open this up, this is what I've exported all those files as in here. Okay. So once again, if we look through here, we can see the files we've got. So I've created a folder here. So there's my P1, we can see it's a panorama page. P2 is the little graphic at the top. P1-3, you can see down here is there's a little lip of the container that goes down there of Object 2. P1-6, that's the button that comes up. And there's the open button that's there. Inside IPS1, I've got the 3 slides I've created. There's my video. I've got the old Outback Australia again. Object 1 is the show button. Object 2 are the 3 pages. Is the main container. So there's my slideshow. There's the page swap. And there's just 2 graphics that overlay the top of it. Object 3, here's my blank page, my map, my video page. Here's my text page, and here's my 3 sets of buttons. They change accordingly to the page they're sitting on. So obviously on page 1, the page 1 button's not active. On page 2, the page 2 button's not active. And on page 3, the page 3 button's not active. And the final one in Object 4 is the hide button. So that's the whole structure there. So let's take a look at that. We'll simply drag that onto Oomph box. And a second later it'll load. And then basically we see the whole template in all the little bits and pieces and stuff like that. So now I can go through and start testing. So in this case we'll hit show. And the panel loads up. Obviously, it's not refined, it's not meant to be refined, it's meant to sort of show me does the interaction work. It's a fast way of actually making sure everything goes. So I've got here is the slideshow at the top. I can try that, yeah, that's slide 2. Yep, slide 3 comes through fine. Down the bottom here I've got the text. And if I tap on the second one, which is the map, yes, it brings me up a map. Now, I haven't put any link or any CSV in or anything else, so it's looking at, it thinks my iOS simulator's in America somewhere, so it's showing me the United States map. And then the third button should load the video file, okay, and tap to play it, and there we go. Okay. So once again, if I come back here, it'll take me to the map, it'll take me to the text box, and here's my slides. Now the hide button's shown, so I tap hide, and the show button comes up. So in this way, I can really test clearly. I can see where things are, if something's not working properly. I can also come in and enable QA mode, and we can turn on debugging, and we can start to see all of the information that we've got on there. We can, if you've got good eyesight and you're not old like me, you can actually probably read this stuff, but yeah, it's all in there, and we can see it's the main thing with these sort of debugging is that you want it all green. If it's green, it's good. If it's red, you've left something out. So that's the way I go about doing it. And then obviously the next thing is to come back to my InDesign file here, and then start to replace all of those objects with the correct assets. And then once I've done, I know that this is going to work. Then the final thing for me in this case was to separate them out into shared layers. So here's here's the final file where I've actually gone and put the correct assets in. Okay, and I've actually created a shared layer here so you can see how it works. So in here, these are my shared layers. And so here's my horizontal. I've got some portrait layers in there. Pretty much all of these are transparent because these are just object boxes and things that appear over the top. You know, you wouldn't expect to see assets in there because these are layers that are being shared amongst other pages, and the assets will be called in from those relevant pages. Here's the navigation bar, the same thing. It's only in this one where I've actually got two buttons that are seen, but remember the links are separate and part of the asset. So that's shared, but we'll be talking about that later on. And there's my folder full of stuff. And if I want to try that one, the Armidale cut down, drag it into here. I'm just going to turn off QA mode, and it's up there, and it works fine. Now in this case, I've put the assets in for the map, and I've got the correct video in there now too. And that's pretty much it. That's Action Hotspots. I've got about 10 minutes in hand. I've actually gone through quite well. It's probably because I'm a bit more prepared this time than I was last time. And in fact, Lisa's looking much more relaxed this time than she did last time because it was a bit hectic. I hope you've got something out of this, and you've seen and learnt bits and pieces here. Just come back out of here. I haven't seen the questions that have been going on, but no questions? No? Everything good? So in a few days, obviously I'm recording this. In a few days I'll be posting the files, script and recording from the webinar in the forums, and we'll post out an update as soon as they're available. And we look forward to seeing you all at the next seminar, and we'll hang on for a sec and see if you have any questions. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. There's a question coming in here from Adrian. Okay, one of the things that you need to remember is that Action Hotspots apply only to the page that the Action Hotspot is on. So for instance, you can't put an Action Hotspot that will take you to another page or action something in another page. Is there a way of implementing an object to only appear for a certain event, e.g. the first time the app edition is open, but not at other times? I don't know, that's something we'll feedback. Is Val online for this? I would have to say no at the moment, but there may be a way that it could go on the wish list or things we're looking for in the future. Actions, there we go. Yeah, Val also said actions also require interaction. So Action Hotspots have to be initiated by the user. They're not something that sort of can happen automatically. Maybe, except in the animations one. We'll have to have a look at that. Any other questions? Well, that's great. Well, listen, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your support. Per bill, Val's coming back. Per bill, there is a way to tell animations to not animate every time to swipe a page. Okay, so that's when you're initially ordering your app in the build. That can be part of the build of the app, but it's global. So in that case, you know, an animation would run once, but not when you come back again. And don't forget, you know, that if you wanted to have webinars on particular attributes or things that Oomph does, don't forget to go to our forum pages and put in your comments there. Let us know what you want to see. You know, we've got a bunch of tricks and tips that we can show you, but we're always interested to see what you guys have got too. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up.